Hey, Westside Christian Center online audience, we are glad you guys are joining us today. You could have been in a million different other places, but you chose to join us for this next 45 minutes to an hour of your day. So we are grateful for that. If this is your first time or first time in a long time, please drop an email or text message to those 2 points of contact that you see on your screen below. And we want to get to know you. We want to, if you are local, we want to take you out to coffee. We want to give you a phone call. If you are in need of prayer too, if you're anybody that's in need of prayer, please text that number there with your prayer request and whether you want that kept between the pastor and yourself or you don't mind it being shared with the prayer team. All of our prayer requests are kept confidential between the prayer team and doesn't get posted on social media or anything so we can best serve you and pray for you and help you in your journey and in our journey of life. So we're glad you have joined us today. Please connect with us and we want to get to know you a little better. But today we are on our 4th week of our series of Sermon on the Mount. And I started off by saying these are the 3 themes that are going to undergird the entirety of the Sermon on the Mount. And here's what they are. The first is the king. And we know the king of the kingdom that we're talking about is Jesus. And Jesus is the king. The second one is the kingdom. Now, the kingdom is different than normal kingdoms. That doesn't have boundaries or it isn't put on a map. But the kingdom of Jesus' kingdom that he came to establish is a kingdom of hearts. It's a kingdom that's much different than what we would say the kingdoms of this world. And the last thing is the people of the kingdom. And the people of the kingdom are the people who have given their hearts to Jesus and surrendered their lives to Jesus. And those are the people of the kingdom. And so when we know these things, we understand, and we can go through the Sermon on the Mount understanding these 3 points and having these 3 foundational points with us, we can understand the theme of the Sermon on the Mount. The theme of the Sermon on the Mount is that the kingdom has come and is coming. Right? And we talked about that the kingdom is a kingdom that's here but not yet. And so when we understand that, we can continue and move through these passages, these chapters in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, and understanding what Jesus is trying to say. And today we're going to look at what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5, 17 through 20, and some more. So basically we're going to finish out the chapter 5. But here's what he says in Matthew chapter 5, 17 through 20. Say, don't misunderstand why I have come. I did not come to abolish the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. No, I have come to accomplish the purpose. I tell you the truth. Until heaven and earth disappear, not even the smallest detail of God's law will disappear until its purpose is achieved. So if you ignore the least commandment and teach others to do the same, you will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But anyone who obeys God's laws and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. But I warn you, unless your righteousness is greater than that of the teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Jesus clearly states that he did not come to abolish the law, to destroy the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. Rather, he came to fulfill its purpose. The purpose of the law and the prophets were to point to him. The purpose of the law, let me say that again. The purpose of the law and the prophets were to point to Jesus. Whenever we read the scriptures in the Old Testament, we must view them with the lens of the coming Messiah. This perspective would have been challenging for those that lived in the Old Testament. The people in the Old Testament, they don't have the perspective that we have. We see Jesus and we know what he did. And the people in the Old Testament, they didn't have Jesus. They didn't know what the Messiah. They had different opinions and different people had different ideas. Like the scriptures told them the things, but they had to imagine what that Messiah would. And they imagined him the way they would have liked to. And he didn't come that way. He came the way the scriptures had taught. And they misinterpreted the scriptures. And they didn't see the Messiah for who he was. They didn't take all the scriptures to count when it came to the Messiah. They just looked at a few or looked at parts of scripture. And then we see that we have the religious leaders who, when Jesus says, I am, who I am, they get upset because they think that he's being blasphemous. Well, no, he's being truthful. He's telling you who he is. He's telling you that he is the Son of God. He is the Son of Man. That this guy is the Messiah. But he didn't look the way the Messiah. They thought that the Messiah would come as a conquering king. He didn't come as a conquering king at that point. It wasn't for him to come as a conquering king then. He came as a humble servant, like Isaiah talks about. And we see the evidence in how they treated Jesus in his life. They crucified him because of what he said. They crucified him, they put him, and they spit on him, and they cursed him, and they threw him on the cross. See, we see the evidence of what they did when they put him on the cross. They claimed to follow God, but they didn't act according to God's law. They just tried to do God's law. They just try to say God's law. They try to speak God's law. The first and most important reason for the law and the prophets was to point to Jesus. But there are more than just this. So the reason for the law and the prophets is to point to the coming Messiah, Jesus. The whole entire law was designed to point to the coming Messiah, Jesus. Everything was designed to look forward to Jesus. When the prophets wrote, they wrote about prophecies. When we have in the prophecies of Jesus in the Psalms, we have prophecies of Jesus in the Pentateuch. Everything in the Old Testament is written with the perspective of pointing to Jesus. See, both the law and the prophets were written, again, to point to Jesus. See, the second is the New Testament is written to reflect Jesus' life and point us to salvation in his second coming. So the New Testament is meant to reflect back on Jesus' life and point us to the salvation that he had come to fulfill. See, Jesus fulfilled it, and now we get to look at the Old Testament in the lens of, this was the perspective. This was what they were anticipating. He anticipated Messiah. And we look at the New Testament and we say, well, this is the Messiah and the fulfillment of what he said in the law and the prophets. And now we have looked back on that and we see that he came for salvation, to give us salvation, to fulfill the law and the prophets. And now we see that. The second thing is that the law was used to establish everyday guidelines. Laws were designed to establish order. Without any sort of law in any life, in any kingdom, there is disorder, right? People do their own things. People begin to seek power, and they go into, and they try to manipulate their way into authority and stuff. And without order, without laws, without a restriction, can you imagine if you went on the roads today, there was no speed limit? Just do the speed you feel was fine. Some people would be going really super slow. A lot of people would be going super fast. There would be accidents, and there's no law. There's no repercussion for any of the things that you might cause. So, well, if I'm going 100 miles an hour and I hit somebody, there's no repercussion for that because there's no law to say that was wrong. Like, hey, no way, I could do whatever miles an hour I want. There was no law. There's no repercussion for it, and there's no thing. So the law was established order with the Israelites. There was guidance amongst them. Otherwise, they didn't know what to do. They've always at the point where the law was given to Moses, they were always under somebody else's reign. They were either wanderers in the desert, and there was always the Abrahamic covenant with them, that they had understanding of what righteousness was and being a good person. And I think those things, that's what we get when we see with Paul. Like some of the things are just naturally built into us, that we're supposed to live a certain life, a certain kind of life. There's an inbuilt conscience. But then when the law comes, there are certain things that they were told they couldn't partake of, they couldn't do, because these things were either cleanliness issues, like, hey, if you do this, you might get sick or get others sick, and this could cause a lot of pain and suffering within the community. So we're not going to do that. We're not going to eat pork. We're not going to have shellfish. Those are things that are unclean that we can't eat. There's standards for the way people were supposed to dress and how men and women's relationships were supposed to happen. Well, relationships between the community. You shouldn't steal from other people. Well, if there was no law telling you couldn't steal, then you would just take what you want from anybody you wanted. All right, but there was a law that just stated, that just helped them guide in the aspects of, hey, listen, don't covet your neighbor's wife. Don't covet stuff from your neighbor, all right? And then there was God's directing. Then the other aspect was there was things directing them to righteousness, which is the third thing, all right? So this is to understand the pathway to righteousness. These laws were designed and given so that they would have an understanding of a way how to get to Jesus, how to live a life that was pleasing and righteous unto God. Now, I want to say this too. There's two ways to do this. You can be a law follower and not be righteous. You can be a law follower, be what we call self-righteous. Look at all the good things that I've done. Look at how much I have given. Look at how good I've been. That's called self-righteousness. The righteousness that we're looking for here is not a self-righteousness. It's a righteousness that God sees in us. It's a righteousness that we see. We do this because we want to please the Lord. We do this because we love Jesus. This is what he's asked us to do. So we follow commandments. We follow the law. We follow what it says to do. So those are the reasons that we have today for the law. There were certain standards that they wanted to help. So let me just refresh you. It was to point to the Messiah, Jesus. 2, it was to establish guidelines for everyday life. All right? And then 3, it was to understand the pathway to true righteousness, not self-righteousness, but true righteousness. All right? To help people know what it meant to be a follower of God, to be a follower of Yahweh. Jesus states his authority and that with this authority, he was looking for people who would not just follow the law, but live the law written upon their hearts. So the law is a matter of the heart, not just a practice. Like I said, there's a difference between self-righteousness and righteousness. The righteousness of God was something great that we can achieve, that we can do by just loving and chasing after the things of God. Now, self-righteousness, like we have with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, was, oh, look at all the good things. I've been a good follower of the law of Moses. I've done all these things. I should be rewarded and I should be highly esteemed, and please, and those were the self-righteous. Now, it wasn't just the Sadducees and Pharisees, but for a long time, people had become self-righteousness because they felt that what they did was better, was good. So the law is a matter of the law is a matter of heart. Jesus says 6 times, you heard it say, but I say, and that's referring to, and what he refers to, and I spoke this a couple of weeks ago. I said, Jesus said this 6 times, right? All right, 6 times he said, you've heard it said by the ancestors. He's referring to the law of Moses. You heard it said. He says, but I say, and it's always like, Jesus isn't going and saying, oh, Moses is wrong, listen to what I'm saying. No, he's saying, it was said, but what I am telling you is it's a deeper issue. The issue isn't just committing murder and killing somebody. Not many people do that, right? How many people in here have killed somebody, right? It's very few, very few. If everybody in the world killed somebody, then there wouldn't be anybody left in the world, right? So that's very few. Very few people commit adultery, right? Now it happens, and things like that. And there's not a lot of it in the world. Not every marriage ends in an adulterous affair. Not every marriage has an adulterous act in there. All right, when it comes to when we just generally think of those 2 principles of adultery and murder, all right? So not everyone does that. But Jesus is saying, hey, listen, you've heard it said that you shouldn't commit murder. But I say, and this is taking a step further, all right? It says, don't commit murder, but here's something deeper. I say you commit murder even if you speak raka to your neighbor. If you speak hate against your neighbor, against the people in around you, that you've committed murder with them in your heart. He's saying, hey, listen, it's good that we don't kill each other and commit murder, but I don't want you to commit murder in your hearts. You can do that. You can do that. You cannot commit murder. But listen here, I take it a step different. Some of you guys, you've already killed your brother or your sister in your heart. You've already killed that neighbor in your heart. You've spoken things. You've imagined things. Oh, man, what I would do with them if I can get revenge on them. If I can get justice, my justice on them. It would just change things, what I would do. And see, Jesus is saying, I say you've broken that commandment even if you did that. He takes it a step further with adultery. He says, if you even look at a woman with lust, you've committed adultery in your heart. And women, you're off the hook with that too. If you look at a man with lust, you committed murder. So this is what Jesus saying that the law, this was Jesus saying that the law is correct, but if you speak anger, lust in your heart, then you've broken the law. This wasn't about following a set of rules. It was about a matter of the heart. Jesus is saying, hey, enough with this self-righteousness. Let's look at the heart. That's what God looks at. Look at David. God saw the heart. Now, David was probably, if you would look at his life, you would say he was an unjust man. He was a terrible husband. He was a terrible father. He was a murderer. He was an adulterer. And, he didn't do good things. And you look at him, and God says that he's a man after my own heart. How is that possible? Well, it's possible because of where his heart was. See, we may have a lot of problems in our life. We may have a lot of issues in our hearts. We may have a lot of hate for people in our hearts. All right, we may sin. We may have a lot of sin in our hearts. But Jesus is saying, hey, listen, where's your heart? Give your heart over. Stop doing those things and stop not doing these things and calling yourself self-righteous, but really in your heart, you've been killing people. You've been having affairs with people right here. He says, I don't care. He says, I care. He says, I care. But it's not just about the way you act outside following a set of laws that's going to keep you out of jail or keep you out of being judged by a court or by a group of people. But I want the heart. I'm looking at the heart. Paul says in Romans 2:15 that the law is written on the hearts. All who sin apart from the law will also perish apart from the law. And all who sin under law will also be judged by the law. For it is not those who hear the law who are righteous in God's sight, but those who obey the law who will be declared righteous. Indeed, when the Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required of the law, they are the law for themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them, and at other times even defending them. Romans 2:12-15. Paul says, God has written the law on our hearts, our consciences. It's like, you ask anybody in the world, people in this world who do not follow Christ, who haven't any religion, will know that there are things that are just wrong. Getting angry. Look at these things. Anger. Even lust. Why is the lust? Why is when people have issues with pornography and things like that, why is it hidden? Why is most of the time people they hide this aspect. They do it in private because it's embarrassing. There's an embarrassment about it. Because it seems dirty, it's not right. Because that's not proper. The law is more than just practice. As Paul said, it is written on the hearts of men. Jesus speaks to the law and gives new standards for those who follow him. And here's what he says. Jesus says, you've heard it said, and this is the 6 things that he says. Teaching on anger, he says, you've heard it said, you've heard that our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. But I say, if you even are angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before a court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fire of hell. He taught on adultery. He says, teaching on adultery. He says, you've heard it. The commandment says, you must not commit adultery. But I say, anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So if your eye or even good eye causes you to lust, gouge it out, throw it away. If it's better for one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. If your hand, even your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better to lose one part of your body than for the whole body to be thrown into hell. Teaching on divorce. You've heard it say that the law says a man can divorce his wife by merely giving her a written notice of divorce. But I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless she has been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced wife also commits adultery. Jesus teaching on the vows. You've also heard the ancestors were told, you must not break your vows. You must carry out the vows you make to the Lord. But I say, do not make vows. Do not say by heaven, because heaven is God's throne. Do not say by earth, because earth is his footstool. And do not say by Jerusalem, for Jerusalem is the city of the king. Do not even say by my heart, for you can't turn one hair white or black. Just say simply, yes, I will, or no, I won't. Anything beyond this is from the evil one. Teaching on revenge. You've heard it said that the law says that punishment must match the injury. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say, do not resist an evil person, for if someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheeks also. If you are sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. If someone demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Give to those who ask, and don't turn away from those who want to borrow. Teaching about loving your enemies. You've heard it said that the law says, I love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you will be acting as a true child of your Father in heaven. For he gives the sunlight to both evil and good. And he sends rain unto the just and the unjust alike. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do as much. If you are kind to only your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that. You are to be perfect, even as your Father is perfect in heaven is perfect. These things here, these 6 things, loving your enemies, teaching on revenge, teaching on vows, teaching on divorce, teaching on adultery, and teaching on. Jesus is saying, the law says this, and it's good. Don't break the law, but I want you to do that take this a step further. The mark of what will mark believers is that you are going to do things that is different. This is different. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. No, I say, if a person slaps you, give them the other cheek. If they sue you, don't give them the shirt off your back, give them your coat too. If they want you to walk with them 2 miles, if they want you to walk a mile and carrying their stuff, walk 2. Jesus is saying something just different than the kingdoms of this world say. The kingdoms of this world speak total different things to what the kingdom of heaven speaks. Jesus wants our hearts. He doesn't just want actions. He says, out of the heart, the mouth will speak, right? But the actions flow out of the heart. If your heart is full of anger, then it's gonna come out angry. If your heart is full of lust, then that will come out. Those things come out of your heart. The kingdom in heaven is a kingdom of hearts. And those who are surrendered to Jesus, the heart and the needs then needs to be right. Most people would say they never murdered with anybody, or they never committed adultery. Not everyone has committed adultery, but many of us have looked lustfully on another person or on something on the screen. Jesus wants more than just fulfilling a requirement of the law. He wants our hearts. And when our hearts are right, when our hearts are truly for his wisdom, his passion, then the law becomes the law. Then we just naturally do the law. We just naturally fulfill the law. So what's our next steps for this week, church? What is it most about? What is it in me that is more about practice than about the heart? What is it in you that is more about doing these things to check mark, to be righteous, to be self-righteous, to check mark the things before you get to heaven, that you just need to rip out and say, no, I don't need to do these things to be righteous. I need to just be. Like, there's an aspect of doing that is good, but if it's doing solely for the act of doing, then what do we have? Then we only have self-righteous. We do things so that we can please others. We do things so that we can please ourselves, or whatever it is, so that we can look a certain way. It's called self-righteousness, church. And Jesus doesn't want us to be self-righteous. He wants us to be righteous in his sight. Jesus righteous. How's my heart? Is it filled with anger, lust, hate, etc.? What's in your heart today, church? Is it filled with anger and hate and lust and all the things? And then what can I do to fill my heart with more of Jesus this week? What can you do this week to fill your heart with more of Jesus? Let me tell you this. It's an act. It's literally doing it, an act of random kindness. A lot of people, I need to fill my heart with Jesus and me worship. That's great. I need to read the Bible. That's great. Those are things, do them. Do them. Not saying not to do them. I need to do this. Those are great things. You want to really get your heart filled. Go do an act of random kindness for somebody. It changes your perspective. Go feed a homeless person. Go talk to somebody, pray with somebody at the store. Go do something outside of your box. Church, let me pray with you today as we go. Father, God, may today, this week, not be a week of self-righteousness, but of righteousness in your sight. That we may have hearts, Lord, like you, Lord, molded to be of you. It isn't about what we do, it's about who we are. We ask that today, Lord, if there's someone out there that they've been either self-righteous or they've been walking a life away from you, Lord, that right now they would give their hearts to you by saying these words, Lord, I surrender my life to you. Please help me to be more like you and less like me. We pray all this stuff in your name. Amen. If you made that prayer, if you said surrender, I surrender my life to you, Jesus, and I want more of you and less of me, then today I would just want you to text, I committed my life to Jesus to this number below, or email that to that email below, and let us know. We want to get you some resources that would help you in your new faith and help you walk along the path of righteousness, not self-righteousness, but righteousness. Church, thank you again for being with us today. I ask that you just have a great week. I want to bless you as you go. Come join us next week.